All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Gary Goldman's here. Gary is a talk show host at WCRN in Worcester, Massachusetts. Gary, thanks for joining me. You're also the author of a new book. What's the book?
Yeah, the book is My Big Mouth and the Ugly Truth, taking the stress out of facts versus opinion.
Well, that's a classic talk show theme.
Yes.
Now, do you go live every day? What do you do over there?
So I do live Friday, Saturday, and Monday. It's kind of odd, but we are changing. We're going to go 5 nights a week, starting on a Sunday night through Thursday night, not Friday night. So Sunday through Thursday. And it's going to be from 7 to 10 p.m. So we'll
Wow.
follow how we card during the week. And then on Sunday night, it'll just be our little venue on Sunday nights.
And that's just going to be you against the world, huh?
Me against the world. Exactly.
Gonna
Exactly.
swing open the phone lines. It's an old-fashioned radio station. It's a pretty powerful signal. I mean, it carries throughout the central Massachusetts, a little bit into Boston, Springfield.
Yeah, Springfield, I get callers from Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, some parts of Connecticut. Yet to hear one from Vermont. And with streaming, streaming and the fact that I do a lot of interviews across the country, people will tune in from all over the country. So it's nice. It's
Oh,
great.
it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. What are your main themes are economy, but I think you're going to be getting into news and
I mean,
opinion.
it's basically right now topic of the day. It is the business, it is the politics and the news stories. We try to keep some lifestyle stories in there on a weekly basis. Our theme since the pandemic has been dealing with restaurants on both the business side of it and the lifestyle side, just the restaurant owners, the difficulties they're going through. And that's been pretty interesting. I've had some people on the show on a regular basis. So, but everyone wants to talk about what is the major story of the day. That's what they want to talk about.
Well, that's what talk radio is all about. Do you remember Jerry Williams?
Of course, I used to listen to Jerry when I was very young, listen during the Vietnam War, laying in bed saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to be registering to draft
Oh my God, yeah, he was a
before you know it."
genius. One of the great founders of pioneers of talk radio.
Yeah, I remembered when I was a little older, and he'd go down to like the mall in Natick at the time and do a show live. I'd get over there just to see who he was and listen to it because he was great, and
He
he did
was.
put on a show.
There was a guy who could sit there for 4 hours straight and do nothing but take calls and just
Right,
alone, no guests.
no guess, all by
Just
himself.
amazing, and he just was engaging. I had the honor of bringing him back on the air in the final months of his life when I was at the Christian station in Quincy.
Hmm.
I'm in Boston now.
Yeah.
My show used to come on right after Ray Flynn's. And there was an article in the Globe about Jerry. He'd been gone for quite a while, and my producer happened to have his private phone number, so I called him and I said, Jerry, I really love you and I miss you. I want to hear you again on the radio. Will you come on my show? And he did, and
Nice.
that led to my introducing him to the station manager and getting a show, which he did for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then sadly he passed away.
Hmm.
And but it was a great thing. Funny guy. I mean, he said one of his great stories. He goes, "There's a famous incident where Jerry, the radio station used to be in Kenmore Square,
Hmm.
in a glass enclosed booth with a whole. You can see him. This was in the late 1950s, and some guy barged into that booth and punched him, and started hitting him, and he got him down on these like struggling, and they're coming trying to pull him off, and the guy goes, Jerry gets up, and he's bloodied, and he says the first thing he says, "Call the Globe."
That's classic Jerry Williams.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah.
So you're talking about Worcester issues, and Worcester in the past maybe 5 or 6 years has had a pretty major renaissance with regard to restaurants and nightlife. Shrewsbury Street, I think it is.
Yeah, Shrewsbury and the downtown area has come alive, especially with the new ballpark they're building down there.
Now, when is it going to open?
I believe it's opening in the spring of 21, so
Wow,
it's
the
not that
Polar
far away.
Park.
Bowler Park,
I
exactly.
imagine the people of Pawtucket must not be very happy about that.
Yeah, no, I follow a lot of stuff in Rhode Island, and I listen to some Rhode Island talk radio as well. And
Mm.
they're not, but you know what? That was their choice. They made that decision, and sometimes I think they look back and say, maybe we were a little too tough here, a little too tough there, because when you drive around the Pawtucket area or even some of the that side of Providence, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and any revenue and business that you could be bringing in, to me, would have been the way to continue. But you know, people on these city councils or these town boards have different opinions and different thoughts, and so don't the taxpayers as well. But
Right.
I sometimes I don't think they look at the big picture. They don't look
No.
outside the box until it's too late when the tax revenue's gone.
Yeah, you have to give a little infrastructure revenue and a couple of things and other breaks to a business to attract them into a city because it's competitive for cities.
Right.
And I know that I've seen a blueprint of the Polar Pocket. It's beautiful. It's going to be amazing.
Right. And what, you know, the stores, the housing around there. And I've talked to people that live in the Worcester area that are telling me that their real estate values have jumped considerably because of that development. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
what you want to hear. Isn't that the way we want it to go? Here comes, you know, the Postocks and other businesses, and
Oh
it
yeah.
trickles to the individual homeowner that their property is now worth more money. So that's great stuff.
It is, and Worcester is a city that has such potential in that it is physically beautiful. I mean, the architecture is
Oh,
amazing. It's very unique. There's beautiful churches. There's great business public structures. They've got this beautiful art museum, and yet it's never really until recently been able to catch on as a commercial and economic hub. And I think that's starting to change
yeah.
with these sorts of decisions.
Yeah.
Now, yeah,
No, go ahead.
in the middle of this horrendous pandemic, what's happening with the restaurants in Worcester?
I think, you know, I haven't been into a lot of Worcester restaurants, but we have someone who handles a food show on our show once a week, and I think Worcester and restaurants in general, they're having a tough time. Look, at you can only do so much takeout. Even opening the restaurants now, people I know in the restaurant business in the Metro West area where I live,
Hmm.
most people want to sit outside. They still don't feel comfortable within the restaurant, and they're having a tough, you know, the tough time when you can't have your bar open or very limited seating. It's hard to keep, you know, make that nut to pay that overhead. And I think the restaurants are struggling. I ran out to do a couple of errands last night after this mini storm passed. And the first thing that came to mind, I passed a number of restaurants closed because they couldn't have the outdoor seating. People don't feel comfortable inside. But here's the problem, Charles. We're getting to a point where it's almost September. I mean, I hate to jump almost a month, but that's the reality. As
Yeah.
we get to the end of this month, the weather changes. You're only going to have outdoor seating in New England for a little more time. Then what do we do? The governor's talking about putting more restrictions on should this pandemic, you know, continue to rise.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there's probably a high probability that we're going to see some increases based on people around us, states around us, just the way people are traveling, talking to some doctors, what they believe. I personally think we needed more of the herd mentality, let people get sick, get through this virus, and let nature take its course
Hmm.
and isolate the most vulnerable. And I'm not sure we're doing that well, even at
Right.
this point. But, you know, so the restaurants are the people that are affected. The weather's going to change. They're going to have problems. They get into the winter months. If you can only have a certain capacity in your restaurant, it's a big problem. If you can't have your bar open, I think the last time I looked it up, the prediction was through some experts that in Massachusetts, 25% of the restaurants are going to fail for good. I think that
Oh,
percentage has
that's
been
terrible.
increased dramatically. And that's a big number because it's the peripherals, the people that do business with those restaurants that are also taking a hit. People don't really
Of
understand
course,
that.
the whole industry, the service, the food industry, the waiters, the infrastructure industry, all these supporting industries are going to take a hit and they already have taken a hit. And I happen to live in Alston, Brighton, and I heard that Moody Street in Waltham
Yeah.
has opened on the street. They've shut traffic down.
Yeah.
And I haven't been down there, so I haven't seen it. But I understand that they've got outdoor cafes, outdoor stores. I don't know do you know anything about that? How are they doing?
I heard it. Someone actually asked me if I wanted to go onto Moody Street last week to have some dinner, and I just didn't have the time. I've heard that, like in Natick, where I am, you're seeing the city has taken barricades and given them parking spaces. I've seen that in cities and towns all over the state. There's some concerns I have with some of those barricades and sitting on the street. That's another story. But again, I think it's great. I think we need to do more of that when there's not a pandemic to get people outside. But again, it's a short-lived situation. Rainy night, cold night. The weather plays such an impact. And in New England, we don't know what the weather's going to be from day to day. So I think while the restaurants they're enjoying that. But they realize that as the season closes in, there are
Mm.
problems ahead. And I think we do have some problems, the economy going forward. There's no doubt in my mind. Because
Uh,
even if
yeah.
things we were on the right track, I don't believe we had hit the bottom yet, Charles, to where we sort of reached a plateau that we're going to start moving forward. And with the way everything's going, the quote unquote, the COVID, it's going to take a little while to reach that plateau and move forward.
I agree, and I mean, although I think that the season could extend as far as into Thanksgiving before it gets really cold, but who knows? You know how New
Yeah,
England is; we can never
right.
tell. Now, I've heard my friend Robert B. Reich,
Yeah.
former Secretary of Labor, talk about the extension of the unemployment benefit and the supplement, which is $600 a week on top of regular unemployment, and that there's something like 20 million people unemployed. His argument is that this should continue not only because it's going to help families that are not able to work, but because it's actually good for the economy to pump that kind of cash into the system so that people will spend money, they will consume, they will, it'll keep commerce up and running. That's the Democratic Party position. The Republicans want to either reduce they all agree that there should be something, but they want to reduce it down to, I think, $200 a week, and maybe peg it to income. What say you, Gary? I know you have a background in business. What do you think should be done?
All right. There's a couple of things there. Number one is I think, let's just talk about restaurants again. One of the biggest problem restaurants having is getting their help back. Because let's face it, they earn X number of dollars. And I'm not necessarily talking for waiters, because good professional waiters they want to get back and earn their money.
Yes.
But some of the help that they need, and not just restaurants, but other business, they're not coming back because of that $600. They're $600 ahead of the game before they say good morning.
Right.
So it's hard to incentivize someone to come back to work when they're $600 ahead of the game. So look, I believe in a safety net. I've always believed in a safety net. I don't believe that we should pay extra money to the degree we've paid it on this, maybe initially the first phase to make sure the economy keeps moving. But I think a lot of people were under the impression, those of us that may have saw through it, that once this ended or once you were called back to work, you were going to go back to work. What they're finding, and they're talking to whether it's economists or just experts in this field, what they're finding is a lot of people just aren't coming back because of that $600. They're using the excuse because there's so many outs with the pandemic. So I think we've got to first figure out, there's jobs out there. We've got to get these people back to work. Then we have to figure out what the real parameter is from keeping people from working. If you're susceptible to it, if it's just based on the fear of it, that's a tough one to argue. I think, any court of law, especially in the state of Massachusetts, is going to go with the employee. But we've got to get them over the fear factor, and we've got to get them back to work. I'm not of the belief that we should have to continue to pay, much beyond their unemployment. I'm more of, if we have to, I'm not for the $600, some sort of in between hybrid, maybe a percentage of what you are earning, just to get you up there a bit. Because the whole motivation should be, as the economy gets back, get people back to work. Now, we're going to have to look at this. It's not one size fits all. There are certain industries that still are not back to work, that may not be back to work for quite some time. And there's some that we still haven't seen the downfall of this. So we have to look at, I think we have to sort of rewrite this. In certain industries, we may provide certain dollars if they're not back to work or they're not called back to work.
Hmm.
It's making it a little more confusing, but just to keep throwing that $600 out or throwing a number out, I don't think that's helping. I think people
Hmm.
working is healthy from so many different elements, one being a psychological
Of
portion
course.
of that. And that's how you get stimuli the economy, not just handing people money to spend and stay home. Again, safety net well needed, but we gotta really figure the parameters of the safety net out.
Oh, I mean, it's a complicated question because there are certain situations where, as long as the virus is still out there, the places just aren't going to open. I mean, we
Exactly.
just talked about the restaurant business. They're not being allowed to go back to normal function, and people are still afraid to go into indoor places because of the virus. So, if you stop the unemployment benefit, then people are just going to have to be, they're going to have to suck it up. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there's,
And look at, I think if someone's truly unemployed and they're not going to be called, like I said, back to work, we've got to figure something out there. We've got to help them out with this. But this incentive to pay over and above what you were earning, again, I can almost accept it for the first round because nobody knew what was going to happen here. But I think we sort of we have a better vision of this, and we've got to make sure that those that are capable of working go back to work, not just sit home. Look at, it's easy. I can see how someone could get in that mindset. Why go to work when I can make this amount of money? It's not healthy for them, and it's not healthy
it's
for the
not.
economy.
Um,
And it's going to make it that much more difficult, Charles, for us to get back on our feet as this thing ends. I personally think as we get closer to the election and the election's over, we may see a lot of this over. And speaking to some of the medical experts that I have a lot of questions as to what is really going on to some degree with different elements of this. But that's a whole nother case. We have to
right.
deal with the problem at hand, and that's making sure that no American is sitting there without money to pay their bills and to put food on their table on any given day.
I've heard that this whole thing will be over the day after the election if Biden wins. I mean, we've all heard that,
Yeah,
right? And if he doesn't win, then it will be stuck in the house for another 4 years. I don't know. Hopefully not.
yeah,
But you brought up these aspects to it. Um, you're not a doctor, but you seem to be of the opinion that the herd approach, the immunity is the best thing. There are certainly vaccines that are being worked on at a breakneck speed. There is a certain drug that we cannot mention on this program because my station will be shut down. I think you know what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
That is proven to be effective across the board, and it's being used widely in places like Great Britain and France and Israel and Taiwan and Central America, very successfully, even over the counter. So, which I wonder what's going on with that. Why is it that it's not being made available in the United States? I don't know. But the fact is that, I mean, do you see, based on your news sources, a modality coming down the pike anytime soon that's going to treat this disease or develop immunity for it?
No, I think look at there's a lot of companies talking about the vaccines that they may or may not have, that they're going to give it a shot maybe as early as December, all well and good. But the fact that there are drugs out there, a drug or drugs, and there are treatment methods that could help that are being shunned, that you're not allowed to talk about, that you can't,
Yeah.
as professional physicians get out and talk about, is disturbing to me because,
Yeah. Well,
you
it's
know,
very
if
unscientific,
it's
you know.
it, if it, look at, if we can save one life, it's a very important. If you could save hundreds of lives, it's even more important. So it's not like there's just a group of people out there saying it. When you have physicians, and I had a physician on my show on Saturday from Texas who was talking about this, that said it's absolutely absurd that those of us that are in the front of this, that have treated people with X drug, and we see some of the positive effects of it, and those that have taken it, that we're being told we can't talk about this. I think every
It's
American, everyone in
horrendous.
this country should be concerned about that alone, because I
Oh,
think
it's
we're
downright
taking the
fascist.
politics and we're intertwining it
Yeah.
with the good of the people, and that's not a good formula.
Gary Goldman, you're in a position as a radio talk show host where you can talk about this. I mean, you're not going to be censored like I am and other people are because of the thugs who run this internet system. Um, but and I'm glad that you're doing that. You need to have doctors on who actually want to talk about the science of this,
Right.
let alone the politics of it, which of course raises the question, without getting into names, what is going on politically with this? I mean, do they not want us to have access to drugs that are going to help? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think a lot of this, if I keep sitting back and saying, if this was not an election year, what would this look like? We could have a whole different complexion to what's going on right now. But
Right.
with that said, there is the big why. Look at forget about an election coming up. Why would we let, in general terms, why would we let people suffer? Why would we let people die if we have the ability to help them? So
No, it's
I'm not a
immoral.
conspiracy. Yeah, I'm not a. I don't like conspiracy theories, but
No.
there's something you can't. You're looking for that piece of the puzzle to ask why, and I can't find that piece of the puzzle. I may surmise why on a number of different levels. And that doesn't do us any good. The fact is that it's happening and it shouldn't be happening. And if, look at 6 months ago, if someone said to me, do you think this could ever happen in the United States, or maybe 8 months, like, what are you, out of your mind? But it is happening, and it's alarming because we are the greatest country in the world, and we should be able to know when to put politics aside and deal with the public health crisis, which, and there's times that make people wonder, how big of a public health crisis is this really? Is it as big as they're saying? Is it being manufactured, or what is the real deal here? But I think there's something else going on. I don't want to surmise with a lot of conspiracy stuff, but I think there is something going on. I think there are people behind it, and shame on them, but it will come to light. And in all due respect, I don't think it's going to play well for those that have been playing politics with this.
No, but maybe they want to drag their feet, as we implied,
Yeah,
until after the election. I don't
right,
know.
right.
And speaking of which, since you're a talk show host who goes on the air daily and takes the pulse of the public, especially in a place like Central Massachusetts, which, by the way, is slightly more conservative than the
Right,
rest of the state. Even though you
right.
keep electing McGovern, who's a left wing, way out on the
Yeah,
left. I think isn't he best friends with formerly friends with Castro or something?
yeah,
Putting
yeah.
that
He's
aside,
yeah.
um, um, what do you think is going on now with the election? Do you think that President Trump is picking up any momentum? Or, I mean, I read these polls on the Drudge Report, which has shifted way to the left, and it's very disheartening.
Yeah, I'm not a big buyer. Look at this, it's the same situation we had with the polls in 2016. President Trump was never had. I don't put a lot of faith into the polls currently. I will as we get closer to the election. I think some of the momentum is changing. Look at, when you have a mainstream media that says nothing positive about the president of the United States, even if people are filling out these polls or answering the questions, I'm not surprised with some of the results we're seeing. With that said, I'm not sure everyone's telling the pollsters the truth. They don't want them to know what's going on. And I think the president's doing much better than we're being led to believe. And then it gets into this whole, the whole campaign. It's a different type of campaign. The conventions are going to be different. There's no real rallies. You can't get Vice President Biden, former vice president, out of his basement, which may be good for him and good for the country as a whole, but he needs to be heard. There's no way to really look at, maybe the stories I'm hearing that he's gone this far to the left are manufactured. I want to hear from him what his real policies are and what he plans on doing. That's why, to me, the debates are so important. And when I hear President Trump's a liar and he shouldn't waste his time doing a debate, that's all the more reason to get out there and debate. Let's hear your facts. Dispute the facts what we're hearing about the president. So, very odd situation, Charles. It's the pushing off of the vice president nominee is questionable. I'm not concerned about that. I'm not surprised, because until Joe Biden is formally given the role as the president, running a president, I'm not sure he's the guy. And I've said this for a long time. There's so many ways for him to bow out. I
I
have
don't think
nothing
he's going to
against
make it.
Joe Biden, and I don't agree with him on a lot of politics, but I do believe it's shameful what's being done to him, because when I look at Joe, I see signs of people that I know that have had some dementia issues,
Yes,
and I see that, and I find it concerning, and I find it almost mean to do this to him,
it
whether
is.
he
It's
thinks he
terrible.
wants it or not. So it's
I actually don't think he's going to make it. I mean, I think they're going to. I hate to say it, but I do think that that Hillary is going to be it.
yeah, it could
She's going
very
to
well
ride in
be.
on a white horse and going to take the nomination, because every time he goes out, it's obvious that he's not functioning well. He's not competent. He doesn't make sense. He can't string together two thoughts,
No,
and and that's why they. I mean, they won't. He won't even go on with Chris Wallace, who always interviews presidential
right,
candidates.
right.
He won't do media. He's just being held under wraps down there, because every time he goes out and talks, it's a freaking disaster.
Yeah, a gaffe, when they said, oh, it's a gaffe is calling me Bob instead of Gary, okay? But when you're not sure of where you are or what you were talking about 3 seconds ago, and it's not because you lost, what you were reading, that is a concern. And look at that, it's the most important job in the world, the president of the United States. And the person that takes that role has to have the capacity to do it. Otherwise, whomever this vice president is going to be, his candidate,
Mm.
you've got to realize that's going to be your president at some point in time. There's no doubt about it, which is even more alarming, because this is a way to slip someone through the back door and get your agenda done that way. But
Yeah.
I feel bad for Biden in one regard, but the people around him, whether it's his wife or other people, should have enough common sense to say, you know what, you've done your time for this country. Sit back and enjoy the rest of your time here.
Yeah, really. I totally agree. So, Gary, let my listeners and viewers know where they can pick up your book and where they can listen to your program on WCRN.
Yeah, so they can pick up the book at Amazon.com or on my website, GaryOnBPL.com. That's GaryOnBPL.com. And it's 8:30 WCRN. You can find it on WCRNradio.com or on the TuneIn app. And it's Fridays at 10, Mondays at 10, and Saturdays at 9 a.m., which is all changing very soon. We're still going to keep the Saturday venue, 9 a.m. It may just be the best of, but Sunday through Thursday, we'll be on at 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. every evening.
Excellent. All right, Gary Goldman, listen, I want to thank you as always for joining me and have a
My
great
pleasure.
afternoon.
Have a
Thanks
great
a
day.
lot. I'll
Yeah.
talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.